Hello and welcome back to me posting speed paint videos about my D&D world building process to motivate me, to keep me in check, to keep me writing this dang book, even if it is at half a snail's pace. It may be November already, but I am not ready to let go of the spooky vibes, so we're spending another day digging into the depths of my vampire hemocraft gothic city called Brimadosa, so let's jump right into it. Alright, in the last two campaign book videos we talked about Brimadosa's goals and inner workings, its relationship with the rest of the empire, and most importantly, the king herself, Ionaira Athanasius, and her grand plans to make Brimadosa an independent country. Even though that covers quite a lot of ground, I'm not quite ready to say goodbye, and I've had a vision of a landscape for Brimadosa in my mind for a while now, so I'm just going to use this video to tie up some of my loose ends, solidify some thoughts that I've had about the place before I move on to other sections of the world. And oh boy howdy, we have some grayscale painting on the screen again. That's right folks, I'm coming back to gradient maps. I took my little break and here I am again doing some silly things, messing around with art features that I know nothing about. The colors are not going to appear on the screen immediately, but I do want to talk about my process a little bit so I don't have to pause in the middle of my world building info dump to talk about me figuring out this whole landscape digital art thing. Actually, because I use gradient maps, my whole color scheme for this place changed. Honestly, I think it was for the better, or at least I'm trying to convince myself it was. Obviously, I originally was going to go for a very red and gray-brown color palette because romantic, goth, vampire, color association, it just makes sense. You can see while I'm drawing this, I'm taking a lot of inspiration from Dracula's Castle from the Castlevania Netflix series, oh my beloved. So it was going to be a red moon shining over a fog enshrouded city because that's the aesthetic that produces serotonin in my brain crevices. But because I was messing with some of the preset gradient maps, I actually ended up shifting things a little more blue. So we have like a scarlet, maybe a little bit of an orange sunset lighting up the ocean behind the silhouette of a cold, foggy Brimadosa. Embrace the vision. Please don't be mad at me for taking the detour away from all the classic red and black vampire motifs, okay? I just really fell in love with this like foggy blue color. I mean, clearly with all this color flashing that's going on, it was not for lack of trying to do something else with the colors. I was trying to make that red-black color scheme work for me, and it wasn't giving me the depth that I wanted no matter what I did. I specifically, and this is quite unusual for me, used so many different layers because I wanted to make sure I had enough contrast between each level of the houses and the spires. I mean, just look at all those layers. I know, multiple layers that aren't just filter layers. It's like I'm a completely different person. But as I was saying, after sitting on this color for a bit, I decided that this made for the best starting point for my city and the colors that I wanted. So I started working and just defining all the buildings. I know the blue city isn't exactly the same vibe as the red-black vampire, but to be fair, I never explicitly said they were vampires. I just heavily implied it. Okay, so a thing I tend to do in my homebrew worlds is make it so that whatever race or species or class combination that a player wants to play, I want it to make sense in the grand scheme of things. Personally, I don't have a hard time remembering when players are unusual for their stations or their abilities, things like that, but I do forget that certain D&D races can evoke a response from NPCs as well. So, for example, a character picking a dragonborn in a campaign like Curse of Strahd, where the NPCs are mostly used to seeing humans. I always forget that especially sheltered NPCs are supposed to be very shocked and sort of scared at the sight of a talking bipedal lizard, and I forget because, my friends don't really look like dragonborn in real life. And I don't think it's because I don't have a good imagination. It's just that as a DM, there are a lot of things I'm thinking about, and that specifically just falls very quickly to the bottom of things that I'm actively worried about during a session. Again, this is just personal experience and opinion. I find that like a repeated theme of shock at first sight having to drive like the first few minutes of conversation with a majority of NPCs can get kind of repetitive. It can get kind of annoying for me. So when I world build, I try to make a good excuse for all players for whatever wacky build that they want to make their character be. They will be able to find a place where they will fit in the world. All that is a bunch of preamble to say that Brimadosa is my excuse for all of those monstrous character races that are available out there. Because as the lore would have it, these chasms full of relics and old magic that are being mined and sold to the Empire have deep, dark secrets. In the deepest reaches, in the most hidden crevices where very few mortals desire to venture, are portals to Shadowfell, a plane of gloom and darkness. The mining efforts have disturbed these portals, and the magic has slowly been leaking into the overworld, contributing to that perpetual blue-gray fog that enshrouds Brimadosa, while also affecting the locals. A variety of illnesses and unique features have plagued generations of citizens in Brimadosa. There are people with strange hungers and cravings, people who have grown more beast-like features, elven children born with unnaturally ashen gray skin. Even some of the animals have taken on shadowy, foggy forms. Only recently, in the light of improving work conditions for those in the mines, have the open portals been identified as a potential source of the strangeness that affects the land. And this, among other issues that needed a watchful eye, is why King Ayanira has established or supported the 5 covens. They're not actual hag covens, but the term coven was born out of a sort of tongue-in-cheek joke among the locals. At the formation of the first committee, there was a requirement that it must always have a minimum of 3 lead members, because 2 is enough to have a discussion, but 3 is enough to break a tie. And since 3 hags make a coven, a running joke began to pick up whenever the committee delegates were traveling in their trios around town, and instead of being annoyed, the committee members found it endearing and started to give their groups coven-like names. So the first committee is the agricultural sector, and they call themselves the Circle of the Silvered Root. They're dedicated to developing plants and farming practices that are compatible with their strange foggy weather patterns and their sea-salted soil. But besides just plants, the circle is also in charge of determining the stability of local fish and wildlife populations, or the viabilities of those as options at all for food, since both the forest and the sea surrounding Brimadosa are very dangerous. The next committee, medical, is now known as the Guiding Hand. It was originally brought together to teach modern medical practices to healers and clerics. Practices that had been withheld is a little strong, but perhaps not encouraged to share with Brimadosa in order to keep it more isolated and reliant on the Empire. Now the Guiding Hand focuses on educating new healers as well as researching treatments specific to the local population, and even more specifically, King Ayanira. The king herself discourages research that is solely centered around her. However, the members of the Guiding Hand are pursuing a cure with or without her blessing and funds. The Order of the Sacred Haven Auroral is often seen as the least interesting committee. However, King Ayanira insists it is one of the most important. The Order of the Sacred Haven Auroral, which between me and you is OSHA for short, is responsible for making sure workers and work environments are safe. Brimadosa is used to years of workers being exploited in the mines, being pushed to limits and hazardous depths to find more relics and get more money from the Empire. Ayanira has created this team to help her make documentation to push back against the Empire's demands without angering them, and also to make sure that all workers, not just the ones in the mines, are treated well. The next group, the Coven of the Copper Spool, was originally named for its use of the message spell, which requires a short piece of copper wire to cast. For that reason, members of this committee always carried a little piece of copper wire on them. The original members of the Copper Spool snuck out of Brimadosa, ran to Basilia, and came back with as much information about the modern world as they could carry. It was a treacherous journey that had to happen over and over and over again, and not every trip brought back good news and success. But eventually they brought history, news, invention, artificing, so much knowledge within the borders of Brimadosa. And now fewer members have to be sent out for espionage, and more members are known as professors and even inventors themselves. Now the idea of the Coven of the Copper Spool is more associated with technology and wiring than it is with the message spell, but there are a few citizens who still remember the original meaning. And the last coven is a Brimadosa secret, and it actually predates Ayanira's reign. Brimadosa may not be able to hide everything that they do from the Empire, but one thing that they have done their utmost to keep confidential is the coven called The Dream Wives. The Exenerian Empire has thus far kept soldiers out of the border so long as Brimadosa upholds their end of the relic deal, and consequently, Exenerian soldiers can't hunt on Brimadosan land for criminals, but specifically people blessed with divination abilities. From the start of her 1,000-year reign, the Empress Madrive has made divination illegal, and in that time she has done her best to snuff out any knowledge, practice, or hint of divination in her empire at any cost. By now, the idea of divination is more of a myth, and ancient rituals and practices are long forgotten, but occasionally a child is born blessed by a nearly forgotten goddess, and the child must find a way to survive. The Dreamwives keep those blessed with the gift of prophecy safe within the borders of Brimadosa, either by helping them establish themselves in the city or by teaching them how to reforge their identity and keep their talents hidden if they wish to re-enter the rest of the empire. And on that note, we have Brimadosa's landscape complete. I am quite pleased with this drawing, and also just the work that I've put into Brimadosa as a whole over the last couple of months. It's been such a fun adventure. We've revealed a ton of secrets and crazy plot points, and my hope is that DMs play into the city in a lot of different ways, because there are a ton of tension points and ways that this city interacts with the places and people around it. There could be players sent to secretly check up on Brimadosa on behalf of the Empire, or maybe Brimadosa sends the players out on an information retrieval mission. Perhaps Empire soldiers are threatening to move into Brimadosa because they don't like the decreased number of relics that are being supplied, especially since there is a potential war about to start and they need those items to help with technology and strengthen their own people. Maybe the players are looking for a divination wizard and they hear rumors of refugees in Brimadosa. Or maybe for some reason the players are trying to go to Shadowfell via the Brimadosan mine. I feel like it's such a full place. Honestly, if any of the sections really has made me feel like it, Brimadosa specifically, I could probably write a whole new book about just this city. I'd love to do some homebrew classes, playable races, monsters specifically for Brimadosa. I think wouldn't that be fun? I'm getting way too ahead of myself here. Not me trying to break down my book into more books when I haven't even gotten through writing the first book. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Maybe I've already spent a lot of time thinking and writing down ideas to turn each of these cities into having their own mini campaigns and one-shots, or maybe I haven't. Who knows? Not me.